Well, let's go ahead and get started then. We're here this morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Anita Zucker, member of the UF Board of Trustees, for being with us this morning. We really appreciate having you. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And we're here this morning, Dr. Zucker. You're on campus. We're grateful for your presence, and we want to talk to you a bit about your life history, if that's okay with you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Wonderful. Can you tell us about kind of your early life history, where you grew up, what the community was like, something in your family life?
Sure. Well, first, I think it's really important for me to let you know that my parents were Holocaust survivors, and they were actually sent to Jacksonville, Florida in October of 1949. And so that kind of gives the basis for how I was raised, the kinds of values they taught me. And I want to say it's been that guide that has guided my life throughout. And my sister was 3 years old when my parents immigrated. And they were sent to Jacksonville. I was born there a few years after they arrived and went to all public schools, was very involved in my synagogue growing up. And so my family's taught me a lot of values about life, about giving. We didn't have money in those days, so they got me involved in things. So I was involved in youth groups and in activities of that nature. I loved sports. I didn't play an outside sport because, again, we didn't have the money for us to do those kinds of things. But I did become a Pop Warner cheerleader, and I had to make my own pleated skirt. And that was a fun experience. So I learned how to sew at the age of 12. My mom wanted to make sure that her daughters had great skills because there ended up being 3 of us. And 2 of us came to the University of Florida.
Nice. Dr. Zucker, now growing up, did your parents and elders give you a sense of family history? Did they talk about your family's heritage?
My mom and dad did. My grandmother came. She and my mom's 2 brothers went to Israel, which was Palestine in those days. They fought for independence because they got there in 1947. And then my grandmother spent a year with us. So they all taught me a lot about their lives. And, so I really know my parents' history. My father was a partisan and fought. And he lost a wife and a daughter during the war. And so certainly that had an impact on his life. But he and my mom grew up in the same town. And of course they reunited at some point during the time after their ghetto was cleansed. My mom fell underneath a mattress, and so the Germans did not take her away. And she was able to reunite with her mother and her 2 baby brothers and a niece that she carried with her who was about 16 months old at the time. So their lives were really difficult. Her father had prepared some hiding places. Unfortunately, he had already been killed, but they knew where they were. My mom was the oldest, so she was the one who sort of led the group, and my grandmother was not in a very good place, having lost 4 children and a husband. So I really have to give my mother so much credit for leading her family and teaching me about leadership, teaching me survival skills. Multiple times. We lost my dad 28 years ago, so once again my mother had to lead our family and has taught us how you get through crises, okay? And faith and family and love and those values were really the guides in her life, and she taught us those guiding values. And I think, yes, they made sure we know the stories. And the good news is they're recorded, and they can be found. Some of their papers can be found on a particular website. So it's nice to know that we've worked really hard to make sure that those true stories can be heard by others through the years.
Exactly. What was Jacksonville like in those years when you were growing up? It was a very different place than it is now, I would suspect.
Totally. It was a much smaller town. It's grown dramatically, obviously, since those days. I could actually walk to my elementary school if I had to, and sometimes I did. I loved my public schools that I attended. I felt like that part of life was good. I was there during consolidation, and I can remember the vote taking place and almost all of Duval County being consolidated. And so we went from, little towns to really this giant city by area. when I was in elementary school. So I really remember that very, very well. And then I went to Landon in the San Marco area of Jacksonville. And when I was in the 7th grade, after that year, they said, oh, we're changing all the boundaries. You have to switch schools. So I had to switch schools, and I went to DuPont for 8th and 9th grades. And the system was different back then. It's not like it is today with a middle school system. It was a junior high school. And then I went to Wolfson High School. And that is where I went to school. And then interesting things happened. In religious school, I went to religious school. My in-laws were my teachers, and they took me home one day and introduced me to their son. I was 14 years old, and I met Jerry Zucker, who ultimately became the person I married at the age of 18. And at the age of 17, I left high school. I skipped my senior year and got permission from the school district to get dual credits. And so I came to Gainesville at the age of 17, and I went to Santa Fe. And I participated in a great program that they had where we became teacher's aides. So I worked 20 hours a week in an elementary school, and then I took my classes, and a year and a half later I finished. But at the end of what would have been the end of my senior year in high school, I got my high school diploma with my class. And so that was a neat thing. I was one of these people that received dual credits way back before people really knew, I think, that they existed. And today it's a very natural thing for our students to take AP courses, to get credits, and to get dual credits. And anyway, it was new to me, but I did it. And so I finished college very quickly after Santa Fe, which I finished in a year and a half. I came to Florida. I transferred right in, no issues, into the School of Ed. And I also continued working in the elementary school all the way through, except for the semester I did my student teaching. So I had an incredible experience working with children, and I really worked with children from the age of 12.
Dr. Zucker, when you were in school in those early years, well, were there certain subjects that you gravitated towards or certain teachers that made an impression upon you?
You know what? There were. I really loved history, and I loved English. So those were probably two of my favorite courses. And in 6th grade, there was one teacher in particular that made an impact, and her name was Lillian Walker. And unfortunately, she passed away not too many years ago. But our class keeps in touch, and so we knew from her daughter when she passed away. She was a really special lady, and I remember when I became a teacher, I went to my first conference, like an NEA conference, National Education Association, and there she was, and we were now colleagues. I went from being her 6th grade student to her colleague, and that was absolutely a thrill. It was very special to me, so I really loved my teachers. But she stands out of my elementary school teachers in particular. In high school, nobody necessarily stands out. I had some good English teachers along the way and a couple of good history teachers. I was not a proponent of the math teachers I had necessarily, but I got through them all. And, I did things. I was in student council. I wrote for the newspaper. I did things like that when I was in high school.
Did you have career aspirations even then? Were you thinking about, a career, say, in education or business, or were you just trying to live life? Or?
Oh, I always knew I was going to be a teacher. So when I was 12, I worked in a day camp. Okay, I didn't get paid the first summer. I taught arts and crafts for 5 summers. They paid me a little bit every summer, a little more and a little more and a little more. But I did that for 5 summers, so I really always knew I was going to be an educator. And that was something that my parents really wanted, and then my in-laws were both educators. So I had these people who were role models in my life. And then again, I had the teachers who were so wonderful, who really guided me in so many ways with their love and their nurturing, especially through elementary school. And we had a great program at my elementary school called Teachers of Tomorrow, and I was a tot. I was the teacher of tomorrow. And in those days, the boys were patrol boys. The girls had other jobs, so we were the teachers of tomorrow. We worked in the office. We worked in classrooms. I could go to lunch and take back a second grade classroom if their teacher had lunch duty. I mean, I'm 12 years old, okay, but they gave us permission to do that, and we would read to the class. We'd stay with them 10, 15 minutes at the most. And so I started doing that at a very young age. So yes, I knew I was always going to be in education.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Zucker, in those days, I mean, you have such a distinguished career in education and promoting early childhood education. What was it about the early years of your educational experience? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what was really good about schooling back then?
Well, what's really interesting is I did not go to kindergarten. Okay, my parents didn't send me to kindergarten. They started us in first grade. And I mean, I didn't have any issues, but I realized the importance of starting early. And I think that was a part of the impetus for why I see early childhood as so important. But I also, like in our center here, the child from 0 to 5 is such a critical piece. It's those first 3 years of a child's life where the majority of true learning takes place, and the ability to learn. You learn how to learn when you're that young, and you're a sponge and you soak up information. And as long as you have a parent who speaks to you, who reads to you, who communicates with you, or others who communicate with you, that's a game changer in a child's life. It's a true game changer. And so for me, focusing on those very early years is so critical, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. And so the research that's being done in our center and the work that's being done, I know actually while I'm here this week, and I can't go with them because I believe it's tomorrow morning, there is a center in Gainesville that's being dedicated to young children. And I think it's the east side of Gainesville. And the members of the Anita Zucker Center for Early Childhood Excellence will be there because they've been a part of the creation of that center. And I'm really proud of the work that they're doing not only in Gainesville but all over the world.
Yes. It's an amazing work. I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking also a bit about, looking at your amazing biography, your accomplishments, noting one among many, that in 2008 you became the first female governor or chair of the Hudson's Bay Company. In the history of the company, which is over 300 years old. Can you talk about that experience, how you first became aware of the company and kind of your role in it?
So I don't feel like I can take complete credit for that. My late husband was really the person who purchased that company. So for years he worked on taking over that company. I'm not sure that was his true plan, but that's what it became. It became, how do I say this, an opportunity and a challenge that he took on wholeheartedly. He loved the challenge. And so the good news is I was always with him, and so I got to hear the work that he was doing, the negotiating that was going back and forth with this public company. And so ultimately he was successful in winning a hostile takeover is what it ended up becoming. It was a hostile takeover of a public company, and we took it private. And I have to be honest, that I received that title. I never ran a meeting because I sold the company after my husband passed away. My husband had cancer. He died of a glioblastoma in 2008, and that's why the shift in my life happened.
I see.
Okay, and it was not planned. It was ascending into leadership through grief is the way I look at it. I never had to break a glass ceiling. It was handed to me. Okay, and so, I mean, you have to look at it different ways. And the business for me was not a business I wanted to be in. And was it an honor to be named the governor? Absolutely. What an amazing honor for this historic company that we really loved. And I'm actually going to be in Canada later this summer, and I have to go visit the stores that are in the communities because you do have an affinity when you've had something in your life. And it had a huge impact. It was very historic. And interestingly, it was tied to Charleston in so many ways, where I live. Because Charleston, South Carolina was founded the same time that business was founded by the same people from England. Okay, Prince Charles, King Rupert, they were the founders of both the Hudson Bay Company and Charlestown, as Charleston was called before it became Charleston. And so it's pretty amazing when you think back in that history, the connections. And I was the only person that realized that there was a connection. My husband hadn't thought about it at the time. And I just said, we're really very interconnected, this history of Charleston, South Carolina, and this company. So it was a fun period in our lives until my husband was diagnosed with his illness. And then it really became a difficult situation, okay? Because remember, my life was spent teaching. And then I got involved in our business after having a second child, and I ran business partnerships. I did community relations. I led 3 of the largest nonprofit organizations in our community, our Chamber of Commerce, our Community Foundation, and our United Way. So I chaired all of those boards. I've chaired multiple campaigns. I work with our higher ed institutions, but I started doing all of those things. And so that was part of my training, I would say, for what I didn't know was going to happen in my life.
Right.
Okay, and so was that an amazing opportunity? Yes, but I made a great decision. And in 2008, literally a few months after I lost my husband, we consummated the deal. July of 2008, I sold that company. And I will tell you that, in my opinion, it was the best deal I ever made in my life.
Wow. Very good. I wonder, Dr. Zucker, if you could talk about, you talk a lot about Charleston, or as we used to call it, Charlestown back in the day, and you have performed really amazing leadership there in the Chamber of Commerce and nonprofits. Tell me a little bit about, what is Charleston like, and what is your vision for Charleston as a leader in that community?
What's really interesting is Charleston has had tremendous growth. So it's been very interesting being a part of it. I've worked in economic development as well and chaired the organization that recruits new businesses. And I actually was the MC when Boeing broke ground in Charleston about 7 years ago. So I've had interesting places and roles to play in what's been going on in that community. So I've watched it go from a kind of sleepy town in so many ways to one that right now is bustling. And actually, it's almost like we're coming apart at the seams in so many ways, because like so much of our country, we're not keeping up with the infrastructure needs of our community. But the education needs are dramatically important as well. And so I've been extremely involved in education in that region. I live in a tri-county area that has 4 school districts. And so I've been really involved. I taught school there when I got there. But when I finished, I still was involved in education, running business education partnerships for our company. So the education needs have followed me. I am a teacher no matter what I do in my life. Even today, I am always teaching, and I believe that wholeheartedly. I'm always learning. So I'm the teacher and the student in my life. I want to learn something new every day, or the day isn't complete. And coming here to your center, I'm learning something new as well, because I was not familiar with this particular department and the work that you're doing, Paul. So I'm very excited to be here. And I knew about the Graham Center, and I'm excited about that because I met Senator Graham actually when he was Governor Graham, and then I have gotten to know him as the senator, and his chief of staff is a Gator, who I know and have known for many years in my life. And so all of these things have been important. But this university came back into my life at the time that I was going through a lot of change in my life. And it was like very good timing. And the greatest part is being able to have collaboration going on between needs in South Carolina's education system and what's happening between my center and the Lastinger Center. And so they're all working with us to really try to change things in South Carolina. And Algebra Nation was adopted statewide. That obviously was created at the Lastinger Center. So I'm so proud that I perhaps played a role in introducing the Lastinger Center to my region, and then our education secretary liked it, Algebra Nation, so much that she helped us get it funded. by our legislature. So that's in place. This year's been a year of implementation that's gone extraordinarily well, and it'll be back next year from everything I hear, and it's going very well. And then Lastinger's providing all the early childhood professional development for the 4 school districts where I live. So to me, I love the fact that I'm here working with a university that's preeminent, that is excellent in so many ways. And I want to be able to share what I've learned and get this university to take its excellence to the world outside of Gainesville, Florida. Okay? I've played a role in my city in bringing new airlines to the community. I've worked with our Convention and Visitors Bureau. I've been at the table when we were recruiting these airlines. So I want to help make that happen for Gainesville, because Gainesville really needs to have some growth in that kind of area. And so I hope at some point in time I can bring some of the experts that have really helped transform those kinds of transportation needs that we've had that are now met. Every time I turn around, a new airline is coming to Charleston, South Carolina. Just today, there was news of 2 new flights being added directly to 2 new communities. Far away, Minneapolis, Minnesota. There's going to be a direct flight. We have direct flights to Seattle 5 days a week.
All right.
From Charleston, we used to have nothing.
Wow.
So I want to help make that happen for Gainesville, because this university needs to have that happen. We are such an amazing place at the University of Florida. I'm so happy to have gotten back involved, and I actually, counting myself, have 10 family members who have graduated from the University of Florida, and a couple of them graduate school as well. Yeah. So I'm really proud of that relationship. My late husband was one of them. He had a triple major undergraduate degree, math, chemistry, and physics, and then he got a master's in electrical engineering. My sister came here, a brother-in-law, and then 3 of my nieces and 3 of my first cousins. So we all came here, and everybody's successful, and that says a lot. This is a place that creates incredible graduates, and it's also affordable. But I love it. So, you know, what can I say? I'm a very strong Gator. I'm definitely a member of the Gator Nation that is so proud, and the fun is meeting people. You know, going to New York a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sitting in a room. I just happened to sit at a table, and I meet this woman, and I recognized her name, and I'm like, "Where are you from?" "Jacksonville, Florida." I'm like, "You're kidding. I know your name. Let's talk a minute." We went to the same synagogue, and her sister was in high school with me, and her son is coming here in the fall. So it's the little things like that, when you meet these people, that makes even the Gator Nation a really small world. As big as it's become, small world stories happen, and so that made me really excited to be able to have something like that happen. And I met another person in New York, and he's moving to Charleston, South Carolina, because he's president of a company who's moving their headquarters from New York City to Charleston. And he's a Gator. And we've already had lunch. We've met in Charleston. We met in New York. You know, those are the connections that make me excited to be a part of the world that we're creating outside of the walls of Gainesville. Yeah. They're big. They're really big. They're far-reaching, and I'm really proud to be a part of it.
All right, thank you. Dr. Zucker, I was thinking about the profound impact that you've had on education, and maybe going back to your life as a teacher. I wonder if you could talk a bit about what has changed as a teacher. What were your observations in terms of what changed over time with the system, with the students, the parents? Did you notice changes over time that impacted the world of education that they experienced?
Paul, there have absolutely been changes. The biggest change would be technology. I would say that has been the biggest change that's impacted education and how teachers are teaching in their classrooms today. However, much of what's being taught is being taught the same way it was taught 50 years ago, and the way schools are run and school systems are run, that unfortunately hasn't kept up with the change that's necessary. I'm thankful that they've at least implemented the use of technology in many classrooms, whether it's through whiteboards or through having some kind of pads, smart pads for students to use. Those kinds of things are necessary, but also teaching communication skills. It's still important to be able to read and write and to speak to each other and to use language and to not just have your eyes in a pad. So there's a lot of change that I wish our educational systems in our school districts could keep up with faster. And I notice it more in South Carolina. And I think about when you look, if you created a chart of how business is changing, the line in that chart would be going straight up. As a business person today, if we don't change, we stagnate. We must change. And why aren't we making our schools change like we have to change in business? So I struggle with that. I struggle with the fact that I am building parts, for example, in one of my businesses for aerospace. They have to meet 100% perfection. Otherwise, I'm putting lives in danger if that part is going to be installed in an aircraft. Okay? Do we have those expectations for our children coming out of our classrooms? In the state I live in, we don't. Because it says in the Constitution in the state of South Carolina that all we have to provide is a minimally adequate education for our children. And frankly, that's disheartening for me. I really struggle with those words being in print. So I see Florida as being much more progressive, so I'm very thrilled to be a part of a state that is progressive. I try to bring back some of that progressiveness to the state I live in, but I do worry that the state of what our youngest children and our K-12 system is receiving just has not kept up entirely with the state of the changes in the world.
Mm-hmm. With the challenges in education, maybe the system not keeping up, keeping a pace with the changes, but if you had the opportunity to sit down with a brand new teacher who's going into, say, a first grade class, what would be some of the advice or kind of words of wisdom that you would want to impart to that new teacher?
Thank you. Another good question. I would love to recommend that teacher find a mentor. Have someone that they can sit down and talk with to get advice. Find a mentor in their school who's been there, who's successful, to give them insights and thoughts and ideas. Another really important thing for a teacher to realize is they don't always have to do it all alone in their classroom. They need to seek help. They need to learn about delegating. Sometimes it's really important to bring the right volunteers into your classroom. There are sometimes parents out there who want to help, but the correct use of those volunteers is very, very necessary. And that can be a huge help to a teacher who's new, who's trying to learn how to get control of her classroom. And the biggest issue in running a classroom is knowing that you have control of your students in a really good way so that they're enthusiastic, they're being inspired by their teacher, but that you're offering them things that they want to do. And you're teaching them work that's relevant. It needs to be rigorous, but it needs to be relevant. So even in first grade, you want them to understand why they're having to do math and why are you having to learn how to read. And show them how you can build things by learning math. You might have to measure. Even creating a recipe, when you're making and baking, you have to measure. And so making it relevant at whatever age, to me, is one of the most important things that a teacher can do, but also getting the help to make sure that their time is being used as wisely as possible. Sometimes there are kids that need more attention. And so if the teacher has the opportunity to give that student more attention while not ignoring the others in the right way, then they can make tremendous strides by being able to work to change those lives. And I will say that in my center here at the university, the professors there are really working hard on methods that are being used to transform lives by the time a child gets to kindergarten. And so hopefully when that teacher gets this first grader, they may already be in a position to understand how they need to work and operate, even at first grade level. But there's just so many things that I would love to tell them. And the other thing that I think is really important for teachers of every level is to learn to use their voices. Because again, in today's world, I think that teachers are under-respected. And if they use their voices, especially as a collective group, they can make an impact, whether it's in the state legislature here, in a state legislature in any state. I do actually get to speak to teacher leaders in the colleges where I live. And I've talked to 130 teaching fellows this year, and they actually started an advocacy program after I left.
And advocacy for teaching or education in general?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
for both. Especially, some states don't give raises that are adequate. So, even if it's just that step increase annually, they need to earn a living wage, but they need to earn respect of all of us, because they're dealing with our greatest assets, our children. Our children are going to be taking care of us one day. I want to know that they're educated, that they're coming out and they're going to be the nurses and the doctors and the people working to make sure our world is okay for us as we're aging. So we really have to work harder, and we have to respect our teachers, and we have to make sure that they get the respect that they too deserve, just as other employees and people in other fields receive today. And they need to be treated equally. And so I honestly have recommended that teachers use their voice and make sure that they go visit their legislators.
I think that's amazing advice. I wonder, you mentioned, Dr. Zucker, the question of respect, and this has been something that has really troubled me over the last several years. I've seen this lack of respect towards teachers, not just in our region, but it seems nationally. What do you think accounts for that, and what could change that for the better somehow?
Well, I think one of the things that could possibly change giving teachers respect is what happens in home life of a child. So many of our children are coming from broken homes with just totally different lifestyles than many of us have grown up with. I grew up in a home with two parents. My parents taught me respect. Okay, I had to respect them, they had to respect me, we were taught to respect others. I'm not sure our children are being taught that in their homes. Especially single parents, they're so busy just trying to make a living so they can put food on the table and have a roof over their heads, that I think they sometimes forget that they have to be a part of educating their children. And sometimes they haven't learned to respect educators because they're not educated either. And so we're working where I live on something. We've created a nonprofit called Charleston Rise, and it is working with our families in Title I schools, taking those parents and trying to teach them how to become advocates for their children, and giving them a subsidy so they can come in, they'll get a meal when they come, and then they'll be educated, okay? What are the things you as the parent or even the grandparent see in the life of your child? And I feel like it's really exciting because I've met a number of the graduates, and they came to a board meeting for an organization that I helped found called the Tri-County Cradle to Career Collaborative. And they didn't know we existed. And so they taught us about what they're learning, and we showed them the work that we're doing. And so now we're going to collaborate. But this is a whole new group of people who never knew they could have a voice in the lives of their children. And they too could then become respected. They're now getting educated. So I feel like if we educate the parents, we can then have help for them to educate their children, because they're now learning that they too are being respected. So it's a circular method, okay? It's this circle, and everybody's in that circle, and we have to find ways to complete the pieces of the circle. And the children may be at the center of that circle. The parents and the teachers, we all play a role, okay? As does the community. And the business community has to play a role, because we need a workforce. So another reason that I strive really hard today to help make sure our education is the best that it can be for our children, I want them to be successful. And I mentioned earlier Tikkun Olam, repair of the world. If I can help change a child's life, and help them walk away knowing how to do something that will make them a successful citizen, I've made a difference. I've helped repair their world. And so my family and I really believe very, very strongly in repair of the world. And so we do our best to try to make a difference in the lives of people. And I think the best way is through education. And now it's got to go beyond our children. It has to be their parents as well. And maybe that will change the whole respect equation.
Dr. Zucker, what have been some of the surprises when you think about the amazing work that the Anita Zucker Center for Excellence in Early Childhood Studies has engaged in? What have been the surprises in terms of like the research, the educational work, things you may not have anticipated that have come out of the center?
I think for me, the thing that's been amazing is I'm not even sure they knew what they were going to be doing, but they have actually created tools that truly, when worked on one-on-one with the educators that they are training, but they're not only training the educators, they're training the parents. So again, it goes back to the parents. Then they are truly seeing a child's life completely evolve from a disruptive child, for example, to a child who now knows how to make friends, knows how to be calm, knows how to learn in a learning environment, and knows how to be a part of the group rather than causing a problem within the group. I can't believe the transformation that they have been able to create. And I'm not sure they realized the impact they would have. But they're doing this globally, and they're working with people all over the world. I think the other thing that they've learned is not only do we have to change how we teach the teachers and teach the parents, but the impact of policy, the impact of medicine, the impact of how a nurse and a doctor speak to a parent about their child. So all of these things, it's again that collaboration and putting the whole together, looking at all the pieces and the parts. So in that center, they've really done so much work to understand that it's about the medicine, it's about the policy, it's about the children, their parents, and the teachers. It's all of those pieces. Without all the pieces, you can't change it.
Okay. So it isn't just about the subject or the topic or math or English or reading. It's really, I mean, some of the things you're talking about, I used to think were, that term socialization, right? But mutual respect seems to be a key element in this involving parents and community.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So it goes beyond the math and the science and the subject matter. It goes to really teaching behavior. Okay, it's about the behaviors that are necessary for learning. Because if you're just a disruptive child, but there's really nothing wrong with you, we can change that. And that's what they've learned to do in this center. Okay, and sometimes there are issues. So the key is finding the issues. What is the issue? Is it a mental health issue? Is it a medical issue? What is it that this baby, this young child, has to deal with, and how do we figure it out and solve it so it comes from everybody working together? And so it may mean that the doctors and the nurses have to work with our educators so that, because they know what the medical problem is that a child may be dealing with. But the neatest thing is that they're finding solutions to what changes the behavior, and the behavioral changes are so great that it changes everything and how that child functions. So it is about creating a successfully functioning child.
Now, Dr. Zucker, when you're talking about the importance of early childhood education, as you can imagine, you're kind of preaching to the choir. But how do you take that, the research, the amazing work that has been done at the Zucker Center, and say, you mentioned earlier advocacy. So how do you kind of translate that when you talk to, say, a state legislator who may not be keyed into that? I mean, how do you educate the already educated?
You have to show them sometimes, okay? So sometimes we might have to show a video. Even if you carry your iPad with you or whatever you have, you can put a video on and just say, I need you to give me 2 minutes. Just look at this and you'll see the change. So there have to be ways that we can bring it. Sometimes I think we need to do more inviting of our elected officials into the setting so they can actually see the work going on. They should get an invitation into some of our learning centers that are being created, our early childhood centers that are being created, like the East Side, the new center that's being opened. They need to see it with their own eyes, otherwise they won't understand. It's not an easy task to get our legislators to understand. It may be easier in Florida than it is in South Carolina. In South Carolina, it's almost impossible. I see at least people that are more open to learning here and to understanding and caring for and investing in education. That's critical. And do we need individuals? Of course, we need our individual donors always investing to help us do more. It is about going greater. And so we can go greater by having more individuals support the work that we're doing and then helping us and create more voices that can then speak to our elected officials to help them understand. It's been an adventure for me because I've been doing this really, like I said, since I was 12 years old, working with children and learning how to deal with kids in a variety of different ways and dealing with behavior modification, trying to help them understand, creating any kinds of methods that would change and be successful. And it's very interesting to me that sometimes it's the policy that gets in the way of taking things that are successful and replicating them. So we have to make sure that we're looking at everything. And I would say that's one thing this university has done so well. We've brought those different departments together. And the collaboration has to happen because we all have to do this together. We have to change the world, and we can't do it alone.
Right. Dr. Zucker, in our remaining time, I wonder if you wouldn't mind us changing gears just a little bit and perhaps talking about your work as a member of the University of Florida Board of Trustees. Can you talk about how you first entered into that role? And also, what is your vision for the University of Florida kind of going forward?
Sure. I got a phone call. I want to say it was in January of 2015 when Dr. Kent Fox became president. He called me. He didn't know me. We'd never met, but he said, I've heard about you through some people. I would love for you to take a chance and go through the application process for trying to become a member of the Board of Trustees. And the funny thing is I had been asked a few years before to try it, and nobody helped me through it. I tried, and I did not get selected. But I really didn't know anybody then. It was the beginnings. This was a totally different opportunity because the president himself called. Members of the staff helped me make sure I was doing the right work to make sure my application was done extraordinarily well because I wanted it to be noticed. And it was submitted, and the best news, I got a phone call from 2 members of the Board of Governors who interviewed me, and I was very lucky and I got selected to join the Board of Governors. And I would say that my work in education in my life was a help in that, and I have worked in higher ed in South Carolina as a volunteer. I support a number of higher ed institutions, and I serve as a trustee of a 2-year institution as well. So I do have some experience, but I also have business experience now that I've gotten into the world of business as of 2008. So my life has changed, and I know a lot about the world. I've had to learn very quickly, probably the fastest learning I have ever had to do in my life. So becoming a trustee has been great because it's about the governance of this university. It's about understanding the things that are the drivers for what makes this place great. How do we create excellence? How do we create excellence for the students that choose to come here? How do we take this university to the next level? And we are working and strategizing on a regular basis as to how to do this. And I also love the collaboration among our trustees. We get along extremely well. And a lot of work has been happening, a lot of study and deep diving into the needs this university has and areas we should be focusing on to help take us to these new heights. And so first of all, it was an honor to be here as the university made that move into top 10. And then understanding why. Why did we get to move? What are we doing to change that? And I've been learning what we're doing. But what I'm doing as a trustee, the strategies that are being created, whether it's reducing the faculty-student ratio, or hiring more professors, or growing our endowment, or making sure our alumni are engaged. Those are just some of the things. Making sure we have the infrastructure here on campus. When we bring in new faculty, we have to be able to provide spaces. We have to be able to provide the places and the spaces so our students are getting the absolute best. And I think we're trying to do that with everything we're working on. And then to also be involved in the Go Greater campaign. Our campaign is very much aligned to the needs of the university and to be able to move us forward. And so understanding those needs is critical, because you can't move forward with the different strategies that we're creating if we don't have the resources to move forward. And so as a trustee, I can go out and I can talk about the strategies with donors, with people that have the resources that could make an impact. So that's kind of an honor to be able to do that, but to also really have a deep understanding of what the needs are and what we can do. So I love the work. I would say I work really hard at it because I believe in it. And being a part of understanding the gears that make this place run is fascinating for me. And I love, like I said, these new learning opportunities. So I, as a person, am growing. I have to be involved in more than just serving as a trustee. Each of us has to have direct roles in our direct service organizations of this university. And so my role is to serve on the foundation board and its executive board. And so I've been participating in that. And between the two, it's such a great place. There's such a fit for the work of the two organizations. And so we're just working hard and just having a tremendous understanding and knowledge. What are the metrics that we have to meet to get the performance-based funding dollars that we want? We have to look at what are the benchmarks that we have to meet. What are the metrics that that Board of Governors wants us to meet? And now one of the biggest areas we're focusing on is the 4-year graduation rate. That has become, we're going to use that for our own benchmark and metric that we wanted to meet, but the Board of Governors adopted it. So they like much of what we're doing here, and I think often we're on the cutting edge of amazing things with our research. The dollars that we spend and the dollars we bring in as an institution, the faculty members that are parts of national boards, we're making sure that we're providing for those things to happen. You know what I mean? We want our faculty to be nationally recognized for the amazing research that they're doing. We want to be recognized for the tech transfer, for the number of patents that are being created, for the startup companies and businesses that are coming out of this institution. All of those pieces matter. And so we really strategize around all of those things and how do we make them better, and how do we provide excellence for our young people, and I think we're doing that.
Yeah. Dr. Zucker, because you travel extensively, and I wonder, now you know so much about the University of Florida, your experience here, and so many family members as well, but when you travel, like say you go to Chicago or Seattle or even abroad, how do you explain the University of Florida to someone who doesn't know about us? I mean, what's your pitch?
Well, my pitch is that they need to do their research and look at what we do and what we offer, because for many, many years, people were not aware of who we are and what we were. And actually, it's through awareness that you also move in the rankings. So we are really doing campaigns to make sure people become more and more aware. So I talk to people and say, did you know that the university has this program, or that we have this major, or that we have one of the top engineering schools in the country? And often it's like, I had no idea. So I love to be able to talk about it, and having the knowledge, I can. And having attended, for example, some of Dr. Abernathy's advisory board meetings, I have a good sense of insights as to their strategic direction as a School of Engineering. So I can talk about the things that we're focusing on. That is so important when you're out making calls. I love medicine. Having lost a husband to a glioblastoma, I've gotten involved with our brain center here. I want to know what's happening, so I have been brought up to date by the head of the brain center, our neuro-oncologist, Dr. Dwayne Mitchell. He's an amazing physician, and I want it, so it's me and knowledge and being able to talk to people outside of here. Did you consider coming here because we have, proton radiation available at Shands in Jacksonville, and it's only available in a couple of places in the U.S. So I have to be knowledgeable, and I have to make sure I educate myself so when I do travel, I can say, wow, we can offer this. Did you consider checking us out? And just yesterday I had the need to help somebody, and so I sent a text message and I got an instant answer. And I found out we have the expertise in that area. And so I can maybe help somebody with a medical issue that can change their life and hopefully bring them life, a continued life.
Right.
And so, just knowing and trying to educate myself about all the possibilities is the only way I can bring the information to people where I travel. And I want them to know because of my pride that I take in this institution. And I think we equal so many of the others. I'm also a member of an organization called the Business Higher Ed Forum that meets in Washington, D.C. A couple of times a year, and it's made up of college and university presidents and CEOs of businesses around the country. And it's a neat opportunity. There are about 60 members, 30 from colleges and universities, 30 from business, including people like the CEOs of Northrop Grumman and Rolls-Royce North America and Boeing. Companies that are really important to where we as a university are going to be heading because we have to provide the workforce for them. So what pipelines are we creating that can help fill their needs? Are we getting those people to come here to recruit at our university? So having, those kinds of relationships, I think, has been beneficial for me as well.
Yes. Well, Dr. Zucker, I know we've taken up a lot of your time, but I do have one or two more questions if you wouldn't mind. So you have received so many amazing accolades in your life, 7 honorary doctorates and many awards. And you also recently received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. I wonder if you could talk about that accolade and what it means to you with your family and its history.
Sure. Well, in order to receive an Ellis Island Medal of Honor, you have to be nominated by someone. And I was nominated by a past recipient who I know very well, who happens to be the president of another university. And he said when he received his, he thought about me that day and he decided he would nominate me. So some of the things you have to have done is you have to either be someone who has immigrated to this country or perhaps a child of immigrants. And I'm a child of immigrants. Actually, my parents and my sister came through Ellis Island, so for me, just that thought was incredible. Okay, it's been a huge part of my life because that's how my parents got here to this great country. And so that was important to me, but also knowing that you don't just receive it because of that. You have to have done good in your life. You have to have achieved some things and made a difference. And so to me, that was huge. And my friend said to me, don't think that you will get selected necessarily in the first round. He said, I had to apply a couple of times. So he said, he wished me luck and, sent me off on my way of going through this process. And the best news is that I was selected. And I was so honored in going to this event. I met some unbelievable people along the way. I even met somebody who's a fellow Gator, and he was a recipient that night. I'm not going to really give details about him yet because we're starting to get to know each other a little bit, but how interesting that we were standing in a hallway about to go into a dinner, and the dinner was just for the recipients and one guest. And I just happened to be standing next to this gentleman, and I turned around and I said, oh, congratulations, because only the recipients had name tags. So I could congratulate him for the honor. And we started talking, and I said, oh, wow, you know, I really like the suit and the tie that you have on. You make me think of my alma mater. He said, well, what's your alma mater? I said, the University of Florida. And he said, that's my alma mater as well. And that was the beginning. I made sure I wrote his name down, and I talked with him about the university a little bit, and great conversation. Then the next night, 94 of us were presented medallions. And I was dead last with the name Zucker. So this gentleman was standing in front of me with a heavy accent. And I remember having looked through the book of biographies and read a little bit about him. And we talked for a moment, and he showed me, and he was wearing a Nobel pin. He had won a Nobel Prize for his work. And, you know, so what a fascinating night to be among people that have done amazing things. And, you know, it's not about being Jewish. It's not about being Christian. It's about every ethnicity and every religion, because that's what this group was all about. It was about bringing all ethnicities together. And then you would get called up, like in a group of 10, to wait your turn for your medallion. Well, the head of the line of my group was Rita Moreno, the actress. So it was like, what a fascinating night I had. It was amazing. And I met all kinds of wonderful people. And they finished the evening. They put us back on the ferries to take us back to New York. But they stopped the ferries in front of the Statue of Liberty and shot fireworks. So for me, what a special evening to meet so many human beings that have touched others in the world and had made a difference. And I got to be among them. It was just an incredible honor. It was very humbling. And just truly one of the most special moments of my life, other than being here.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Zucker, any other thoughts you have or things you want to share as we kind of conclude?
Just to know, I want people to know how proud I am of the University of Florida, and that we all need to make sure we share and talk about how great this institution is. We need people around the world to realize how fabulous it is. And we are working really hard. We want to take this university to the next level, which will be top 5. That group of universities has not changed in 20 years. It's time for a new edition, and we are going to be that institution that gets there because we're working so hard. But it is about the excellence. It's the excellence we provide to our students, the excellence we provide to our researchers and our grad students, but it's the excellence they provide to the world to change the world because of the work they get to do here. So all that means so much to me.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Zucker, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real honor and a privilege to be able to speak and with you and to learn from you this morning.
Thank you so much, Paul. I greatly appreciate being allowed to do this.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much.